Hey, welcome to another 68 Mercury Cougar video. If you watched the last one, I did a bit of a stereo upgrade, but I found out that my dash speaker was blown. So that was disappointing. So I already got a replacement to go in its place, and hopefully I can have full tunage all throughout the car. But this dash is fragile and a little bit complicated, and you really don't want to take it apart unless you have multiple reasons to do so. So one other reason I've had this clock for a while collecting dust that I've been meaning to install. So I'll do both of those things today. But first, we have to take this apart. So the standard base model Cougar has a different dash setup than the XR7. The XR7 got a fancy wood grain dash with 3 panels and extra switches and gauges. So it's a little bit different. The base model, which is what this is, has this padded face pad and this trim that goes around it. So this is the first thing that we have to remove before we can get these actual plastic panels out. So in 67, the trim went on with screws that were visible. So that's actually quite a bit easier to remove than this one. This being a 68, they actually hid the fasteners on the backside, which looks nicer, but there are these crazy little metal clips that are now impossible to find. So they're pretty rare, they can break, and they clip into these plastic panels. So it's a little bit of a strange setup. The other fun thing on this one, since everything is beautifully restored and re-chromed, so of course I really don't want to scratch anything, so I'm gonna have to be really careful taking this piece off. Not to mention this is an original fragile face pad. There is no new replacement for these. And there's already some little cracks in these tight areas. This part around the gauges is the most fragile part because it's so thin. So that's gonna be super fun. But if I take my time and be careful, at the end of the day, we'll have a couple nice upgrades. So let's start gingerly taking this apart. Just as a precaution, I'm gonna disconnect the battery and then mask off all the lower areas where I'm gonna need to fit a prying tool because I really don't want to scratch anything. And then don't forget to take off this little wiper switch knob because it gets in the way of the face pad. Next, I could start finding where the clips are and gently try to pop them out of the plastic panels. I was using a plastic prying tool instead of a metal one just because it's a little bit gentler of a tool and less prone to breaking stuff. You want to get directly behind each clip to pop it out, and once you find the bottom ones, the top ones are in the same location. The driver's side is definitely trickier, but with a bit of patience I was able to get it out. Got it. There it goes. That one's out. There it goes. It's in there. There we go. There it is. Woo! Okay, now find a flat surface, which in this case I'll just use the dash. Here's one of these crazy little clips that wanted to stay behind. There's a total of 13 of these little clips, and I am lucky enough to have 12 of them still, which is kind of rare. They tend to break and there is no new replacement, and it's very hard to find originals anymore. So a lot of people end up using strips of Velcro along the aluminum trim to hold it to the dash, which is a pretty good idea. But I would love to see somebody reproduce these clips or come up with some kind of 3D printed alternative. Okay, next step is to take out the gauge cluster. So there's one screw on the bottom of each gauge pod. One there and one on the other side. Then there's this one screw in the corner and then a few around the top. And I almost forgot this hidden stud on the right side that you have to take the cigarette lighter assembly out to get to. And then when we pull it out, we have to disconnect the speedometer cable and other wiring. And at the same time, we'll put some cushioning on the steering column so we don't scratch anything. The reason the gauge cluster has to come out first is this right side piece has a couple of tabs that go underneath it. So This has to come out before that can come out. It's times like these it helps to have a bunch of different tools. A stubby little ratchet like this comes in handy. With all the fasteners out, we should be able to gently pull the cluster out just enough that we can undo the speedometer cable and the wiring. Starting with the speedometer cable, you just need a 3/4 inch wrench and maybe some small pliers to hang onto the cable so it doesn't spin as you try to loosen the nut. Then you can get a little more wiggle room and pull the cluster out further and undo the wires. This little purple one has tabs on it, so you need to squeeze it to unplug it. Next I'll do the wiper switch plug, which just pulls right out. And lastly, the main plug you'll also have to squeeze the sides of because it has tabs on either side in order to unplug it. And that's it, the cluster is ready to come out. So now with the cluster out, you can see where the clock goes. And this is the blank panel. And the wiring is already there from the factory, it's just this one wire. So installing the clock is just a matter of those 3 screws, plugging in the wire, and we have to deal with the knob on the front side. So with the clock we still use the same lens, but as you can see there's a little plug there at the bottom, so that comes out and the knob comes through. We just have to undo the chrome part of the knob and put it back on after it's through the lens. Okay, we're not quite out of the woods yet, still have to get this piece off. In order to do that I'm gonna have to remove the glove box, but it's pretty easy. It's just 3 small bolts at the bottom, and of course unlatch it and the whole thing comes out. Then we'll have access to the back and these crazy little speed nuts that attach to plastic studs that are super fragile. I'll try to show you that. Moving this air duct out of the way gives us a decent view of 3 out of 5 of these fasteners. So I'm going to use just a socket. We shouldn't need a tool because these shouldn't be that tight, but they're 5/8. So I'm trying to show you with the GoPro in here, but it's really hard to see what I'm doing. There. Oh, that's lost forever. Good. Well, let's just pretend everything's fine. Keep going. Looks like I'm gonna have to take the radio out to get that last one. Dang it. There's also one on the other side of the duct, but in my case it's broken. Okay, news update. I had to take the radio out in order to get to the last stud on the back. And it's probably for the best anyway, because I'll have to be working on wiring and undo this center duct. Now with all of those speed nuts removed and nothing broken, fortunately, we can take these top screws out and the whole piece should come out. And now we can finally see the dash speaker. This is how far we've had to go just to replace this thing, so it's a good thing I'm also installing a clock at the same time. Otherwise, I don't think it would be worth all this effort. The next day I got back into it and started replacing the speaker. There's only 2 nuts that hold the speaker to the underside of the dash, but for some reason I thought I needed to remove all these little ones around the outside. You'll see when I have it out that I didn't need to do that. But I decided to loosen the defroster duct so I could get to the fasteners more easily, and eventually I got it out. So here's the old speaker next to the new one, and these are actually just different versions of the same thing made by the same company, Custom Auto Sound. So this is the old version, and this is the newer updated one. So the differences are it has a mesh screen over it. You can see these drivers are a slightly different design. It's otherwise about the same. However, big difference is that this one now has these mounting tabs built in, which is what the car actually has. It has 2 studs that hang down. You can just attach those nuts to, which is way easier than this old system, which used these separate bracket pieces. And that's why I had to have 4 screws around the outside, and then I could attach the factory nuts there. So this will actually be way easier to go back in, because I can disregard these outside holes and just use the 2 that are built in the car structure. So that's great news. Let's hope this works. Well, safe to say they haven't really perfected this design yet. The way these tabs are, you have to bend them up to get those nuts on so they go on crooked. So that's not ideal, but it's there, it's on, it's tight, it's not going anywhere. I guess I can plug the wires in now and test it out. Works! Got it hooked up. Okay, now we get to move on to clock installation. First we'll need to remove the chrome knob, which is just held on with a tiny screw. Then we can take out this old blank gauge with these 3 Phillips screws. This blank gauge piece still has value as it can be turned into a mini tachometer. And if you're fortunate enough to still have this little plastic plug, it can be popped out from the backside. Put this somewhere safe in a little baggie. Then the clock just goes in the same way, just have to make sure to line up the knob with the hole in the lens. Now we can put the shiny chrome knob back on. You just have to hold on to it while you screw in the screw. Now we can plug in the existing power wire, and that's about it. To set the time, you just pull out on the knob and gently spin the hands. Like everything else, it's kind of fragile. Hey everybody, bad news. I thought it would be a good idea to hook this clock up to a 12-volt power supply just to test it before I put everything back in the car. And nothing happens. Okay, hang on a minute. Plot twist. So it works when I take it out of the cluster and hook it directly up to the power supply. So why does it not work when it's inside the instrument cluster? Well, I figured out why. It turned out this little nub from the chrome button in the center of the lens was sticking out far enough to jam into the clock mechanism. So I had to separate the gauge panel from the plastic bezel so I could get the lens out, trim off that little nub, and then put everything back together. After that, it worked perfectly. Okay, now that the new goodies are all functioning, it's time to put things back together. And as you would expect, it's the reversal of taking it out. So the first piece to go back in is this passenger side dash bezel. And as I mentioned earlier, it has those really fragile plastic studs with metal nuts that eat into them. So it's just going to be a case of carefully putting those back on and hoping that nothing breaks. started out by loosely installing these top screws to hold it in place, but I won't snug them down until the other side is in. Now I should be able to put these in 1, 2, 3, 4, and normally 5, but that one's broken. I'll try to get this one first and then I can put this duct back on. When reinstalling these nuts, just make sure they're going on straight and don't tighten them too much. You only need them to just be snug enough to contact the metal. Anyway, then I could reattach the center vent duct for the AC. This was only on cars with factory air conditioning, and mine works, which is really nice. Now that the passenger side piece is on, we can bring the gauge cluster back in and reattach everything in the reverse order. Okay, now I should be able to scoot this thing back. Gotta watch out for the stud on the right side and get it through the correct hole. I might have padded this too much. Okay. I believe I can start putting fasteners back in now. Once again, I'm starting with these top screws, but I'm not going to snug them down until all the rest of the fasteners are fully installed. Finally, once everything was snugged up, I could reinstall all the lower dash things like the cigarette lighter and ashtray, the radio, and the glove box. Okay, now for my least favorite part, putting the face pad back on. It's just a matter of making sure all those little clips line up and popping them back in. Sounds simple in theory, just have to be really careful. You should kind of feel them slot into place. Oh, I dislike this a lot. Okay. All right. Those are in. I just have to do the difficult side. Yay! Oh boy. That one has. Okay. I think I got it. Phew. Let me just double check. Yeah, it's in. That's in. That's in. That's in. That's in. By Jove, I think we got it. I think we got it. Last but not least, don't forget the little wiper switch knob. I gotta admit, I am super relieved that everything went back together without breaking anything, without any scratches on the chrome. That's the riskiest part of this project. It's not super difficult, it is pretty fiddly, but it's just the risk of breaking 50-year-old plastic pieces and scratching restored stuff. So I'm just glad it went well, and super excited to have a working clock right in the middle of the gauges, right in my sight line. It's a small thing, but it's very satisfying to have a smooth running clock in a 50-year-old car. And now having that dash speaker in the center really does help the sound up front so I can enjoy my new stereo. So 2 seemingly minor upgrades, fairly big project to get to all of it, get it all working and back together, but very satisfied at the end of the day. So now I can enjoy this car some more. This might be the last Cougar video for a little bit, unless I do a mic'd up driving around video, which could be fun. But I got work to do on my Miata, got work to do on my Opel. So keep an eye on the channel. You never know what's going to happen next, but it should be pretty good. So hit some buttons down below. It always helps out, and I'll see you in the next one.